Employees at an escape room. What was the weirdest things you've witnessed through the cameras? A couple broke up in the room I was running. I then gave them loads of hints so they could get out ASAP. I went to a place with my family and while we went into our room, we saw some employees working on fixing another room. Apparently someone from a group before us decided the only way out was to shoulder charge the door, which wasn't all that strong, and ripped the entire thing out of the frame. I guess they technically succeeded. There was a room with a bed in it. Instead of continuing to follow the clues, two guests proceeded to put themselves to bed and then take a nap for half the time. They weren't hurting anything, so I let it happen. Before they left, they remade the bed and tucked two of our skeletons inside. My mother and her friends went to an escape room one night for a girls' night out, and while they were solving the room, one of them elected to just fiddle around with the final lock on the door, which was a 4-digit code, and miraculously unlocked it and walked out. I asked an escape room employee this once. Our room had a big metal safe. One guy who played in that room just picked up and carried the safe around the entire time. Someone dug through 6 tons of sand on the floor to follow a live electrical cable, which she then tried to chew through. Edit. This was after being told multiple times there were no clues under the sand. Nothing really earth-shattering here. The strangest thing I can think of is this one time the guest skipped every clue and happened onto the final solution to escape the room in the first 5 minutes. As I was heading towards the exit of the room to offer them a steep discount for completing the room on record time and seeing if they wanted to try another room, I overheard the guest starting to unravel the mystery backwards from the end point. Seeing them sound so excited and into the mystery, I walked back to my station and saw them solve every puzzle backwards in record time. After they got out, we shared some laughs over what happened, then traded a free coupon for their next visit if they told me how they unraveled everything, so we can run it as a new scenario. That's a really ambitious NSFW tag. The story that comes to mind is a group of Swedish construction workers genuinely thought the solution to the puzzle was to lift the door off its hinges. Although a more common experience would be explaining to customers that the games aren't as fun when intoxicated, and then have them complain that the game was way too hard. That stopped when we started adding a histogram of every player's score on the souvenir photos, and their embarrassing times were way longer than average. Was in an escape room with some friends and a bunch of strangers. Premise of the roomies: that you've been kidnapped by a serial killer and you've got to get yourself out of his basement before he comes back. So it's super creepy and gross. A few clues in, we find the key to a 7 feet tall locker. One of the guys I don't know goes to open it. I'm standing right behind him. He unlocks it, and just as he reaches for the handle, the door starts to open from the inside. We were so in the moment. He and I just slammed the damn thing shut and hold it with our combined weight. We're all asking each other what to do, and there comes a polite knocking from inside the locker. We're all jumpy as heck, but we finally decide to let whoever is in there out. It was the killer, and he was supposed to just jump scare the crap out of everyone and run out of the room. After we all escaped, he told us that had never happened before. He was just standing in the locker trying to figure out what to do. So funny afterwards, but it genuinely scared the crap out of me when it happened. Edit. For those who asked, it was the basement at the Exit Games in Wilmington, NC. Highly recommend their rooms. So clever and well planned. Best escape room story I ever heard was someone flying home for Thanksgiving while his sister had persuaded their parents to try out an escape room together. They arranged it with the staff, so he was waiting for them in the second room. Not that crazy, but a fun story. This is not super relevant to the question, but a few years ago I went to an escape room to meet a Tinder date for the first time. He had paid for the session online and told me to get there at 7. He just didn't show up. I ended up completing the escape room with one of the employees there because she felt bad for me and the session was already booked, lol. So there was this group of 5 or 6 teenagers in this one room, and at some point when they open a secret door the lights go out, making it almost pitch black in there. Now the cameras we look through obviously changed to using eye light, and I immediately see 2 of them go in a corner and start making out. So yeah, pretty weird having to see that while they're friends. less than 2 meters away, be oblivious to what their friends were wasting their time on lol. We had Zed a group that, within about 30 seconds, worked out the code because one of the guys figured out a clue from the first 2 sentences from the video. They were mad off. The group of guests managed to pull an entire twin bed, mattress, frame and all, through a thin passageway and into the final room through the secret door. They thought it would be part of the puzzle. It was not. Bachelorette party came in and booked the jungle temple themed room. They were beyond wasted, and I'm not sure why we even let them play, but whatever. In the first room is a book with some pictures of fertility idols, which were just little Buddha statues. One of the girls went to the bride-to-be and pointed to the Buddha and said, "Look, it's your fiancé," and everyone but the betrothed had a good laugh. Bachelorette stood in the corner and Blair witched it for a few minutes, while one of her friends consoled her. 15 minutes into the game, the one who made the joke had enough of it I guess, and stormed over and whipped her around and yelled, "It's not that serious. Get over it." Dude got sucker punched by the sash wearing, tiara clad Hulk, straight domed, made a great sound. I look over at the monitor and see them all swelling in a storm of fists. I get up and head over to the phone and call the manager at the front desk and let her know about the fight club happening in Temple. They continue to fight in the hallway outside the room before moving to the sidewalk outside, giving a great show to the next door Sis's Pizza visitors. Best part is when they've stopped smashing their fists into each other's skulls. They came back asking for a refund since they only used a quarter of the time they paid for. If you're ever looking for a job that generates good stories, look for escape rooms. People are dumb and you get to watch them do it. I worked at one, but our game masters were in the room as hosts/actors. As the host of the room, my job was to make sure the guests were on the right track and being safe. As an actor, I also had the job of immersing people in the room's environment. I mapped out a Santa/Christmas themed room where the room host basically acted like Buddy the Elf, and the plot of the room revolved around escaping from Santa's office. There was a key on the Christmas tree, taped to a candy cane. The way we hid it, it was one of those things where you didn't see it at first, but once you did you couldn't unsee it. Some groups found it quickly, while others never did without help. If your group was pleasant, but struggling, I usually sang about candy canes until you caught on. If you really weren't getting it, I'd make a show out of gasping for air and singing it in one breath. If your group sucked, mean, obnoxiously wasted, and etc., then you'd get a fun fact about Santa. He can simply glance at any Christmas tree and tell you how many needles there are. I'd then watch the jerks count needles on a pine branch. The highest number counted was somewhere over 300. At that point they'd ask, "How? Is this a clue?" I'd say, "Clue? It's just a hobby. Oh look, a candy cane," and start singing about them. I don't know if this was one of the weirdest, but my friends and I turned off the escape room. There was a box on the wall with a pinhole in it. In a chest, we found a hat. On the hat was a hat pin. The hat pin fit perfectly into the hole in the box. Inside the box was a big red switch. We flipped the switch. Suddenly every single secret door opened. The lights turned on. The video projector switched from showing spooky words to showing a Windows desktop. And the music and sound effects all stopped playing. It was very confusing. About 2 minutes later, one of the employees came in shaking his head in disbelief. Apparently we found the kill switch and turned the whole thing off. He had to reset the entire room and then perform the actions in order to get the Gamsted back to where we had been before we killed it. This took about 20 minutes. When we were let back into the room, we had only 5 minutes left on our timer. Miraculously, we completed the room with 34 seconds to go. Management has assured us that the hat pin has been removed from the room as a result of our incident. My cousin went through an escape room with his friends and were solving the puzzles at an alarmingly quick rate. They were told the entire escape process would take anywhere around 60-90 minutes. Well, they were finished in 10 minutes. The coordinator running the room was floored and told them this was the quickest she'd ever seen someone escape. Thinking they were cheating, she went into the room. Well, whoever the employee was that cleaned up the escape room before them left the answer key behind. So my cousin and his friends had found the answer key and it still took them 10 minutes to escape the room. They got a refund and were asked to please try again. I did one, and I'm partially colorblind, and one color I can't see is yellow. Early on, I found and announced the word 8 written on the blinds on the door in white. The last lock was a color/number based lock, matched the colors to the numbers, and a hint told us which ones we should found, including white and yellow. We had 2 white numbers. One we thought was a clue to something else as it worked. After 10 minutes, we finally shouted out for a hint, and they told us where the yellow was. My friend who requested the hint looked and shouted to us who checked the 8 on the door besides me, and it turned out it was just me. We hear him shouting for frick's sake. How could we forget he's freaking colorblind? He shouted back to them. I was the only one to see it, and I cannot see yellow, and we hear them erupting in laughter along with the group doing the one next door. We are all laughing too by this point. We got out in under 55 minutes. Yeah, this one guy literally walked in and kicked the door down and walked through. His friends and I just stood there like, oh okay then. I worked at an escape room where the game masters were inside the room with the guests as actors who were in character with the room's theme. We had a zombie room with 2 actors, a doctor and a zombie. The plot of the room was fun. Guests walk in. The doctor would begin a scientific lecture about a virus reanimating dead tissue. While this is going on, the zombie, chained to the wall, chain got longer every 5 minutes, is snarling. After like a minute, the doctor would have to tranquilize the zombie as preparation for experimentation. Here, the zombie would attack the doctor, alarms go off, door self locks to contain the virus, and we now have an hour to escape or be locked in forever. As the doctor, I would get more and more sick as the hour went by, all while trying to remain studious and terrified at the same time. With about 3 minutes to go, regardless where the guests were with escaping, I'd faint. Usually everyone stopped what they were doing to gawk, waiting for me to pop back up. This was usually where the zombie in the room would go ham and start chasing people around the room. With the commotion I'd twitch, and they'd scream each time I did, because it added to the confusion and chaos. With a minute left, I'd pop up in a backbend and start spider walking at people with an Alka-Seltzer tablet foaming out of my mouth. I actually made someone pee themselves doing this. I'm not an employee, but once my friend saw a kid try and suffocate another kid with a blanket in the escape room. Not an employee. While looking for a key, I put my hand in a box and pulled out a stuffed rat tied to a cord. I was convinced this was important. Stuck my fingers up a tear in the stuffed toy's asshole and started yanking out its stuffing, convinced I'd find a key, a clue, something. I was quickly warned over the phone by an employee that the rat was just part of the set and to please leave it alone. TLDR, got in trouble for fingering a toy rat at an escape room. Not an employee, but my so's old neighbor worked at an escape room and we went to try it out. It was a lot of fun, but we finally got the lock off this big wooden door for access into the second half of the room. And for some reason neither of us decided to try the door. We kept looking for clues for around 10 minutes until, over the walkie, the guy straight up told us to pull the door, and you can tell he was sick of it. There was an episode of Impractical Jokers where Sal was the loser and his punishment was that he had to piss his pants while in a locked escape room. I would guess that the employees were in on it, but the other people in the escape room definitely weren't. I work as an actor in an escape room. Fun fact, only 6% of escape rooms in the US use actors in the room with participants, and one of our rooms has a prop toilet. You can tell where this is heading. Everyone always thinks it's a great idea to get wasted or high, or both, before they go to an escape room. Like that will somehow make you smarter. There were probably 9 participants doing the room, and one of the old guys had to pee so bad, but didn't want to say the safe word to be let out of the room. He thought he was being sneaky and went over to the toilet to take a pee, but even when it doesn't look like it, we are paying attention to the entire room. Luckily I caught him before he whipped it out and took a piss. He was then escorted out of the room. He then spent the next 10 minutes trying to knock the door in to be let back in. Where the other employee was I don't know. They didn't even solve the room. One of my friends works for a mobile escape room, like a double wide trailer, that moves around for various festivals. And he told me that before he started working there, her extended Christian family had arranged a fun outing and the owner of the business had family-friendly versions that they approved of. I don't recall what the scenario was, but at one point, the family was so heavily divided, one stabbed the other with a pocket knife. My friend told me that he had to cover shifts where the employee who was working that night had to go to trial as a witness. Honestly, most of the odd stuff that happens is because us employees forgot to reset one part of the room. The worst was when this new employee reset a room for the first time by himself. He locked all of the locks, but never actually locked the door of each safe to itself. So the customers were able to open everything like there were no locks at all. He eventually became assistant manager at our store. We were desperate. Feel like it's gonna be sex. Not a worker, but went to an escape room with my BF. Pre-gaming heavily beforehand. To do an escape room in Brooklyn by ourselves a random Sunday early evening. He has a habit of being able to fall asleep immediately regardless of where when wasted, and unfortunately this particular room had a bed. The people were very nice and offered to just refund us when he fell asleep on the bed frickin' immediately. I was embarrassed, wasted, mad off, determined and tried to solve 4 clues for about 30 minutes before I gave up and asked to be let out. There was almost no one else there, so I'm sure it was a hoot/cringe to watch. Kudos to them for still offering the refund when we left, but I was beyond mad. Can't wait for the explosive diarrhea episode. My husband, my best friend, and I do escape rooms a lot. I have many experience stories. We decided to do one just the two of us, and we are paired with another group of women. They were a bachelorette party, 3 of them, and they were wasted off their asses. Very nice, but very wasted. They were all wearing sashes that said Bride Tribe and insisting we all go drinking together after. The amount of times I said no, we can't just bust down the door, was incredible. But the best part was they were oddly helpful. They just kept finding things and bringing them to me. One found a clue cause they took a painting off the wall which I probably wouldn't have ever done. The place was really nice about the whole thing. They gave us a free game for being so chill about the whole thing, and we still got out of the room. My other favorite was a spaceship themed room we did with a couple of teenagers. The teenagers were great. They were helpful. We solved a code and a section of the table starts opening up. Before we can even register what's happening, this boy reaches in and hits what is apparently a bachelorettes button. The whole room starts going off that it's in self-destruct mode. Red lights, siren, the whole bit. The kids lose their minds that we are going to fail the room, yelling at their friend, and the adults are trying to stop laughing long enough to explain that we already knew how to fix it. There was a panel that 2 people turned keys in tandem to stop the self-destruct, as every space movie always has. I will never forget the look on their faces. Absolute freaking panic. I had a girl pee herself in one of the rooms. It's important to note that our escape rooms aren't meant to be broken out of. You have a set objective in the room, so the doors are not locked. She could have left the room at any time. She just chose not to. I never got a chance to ask her why, as they left relatively quickly. The hole in the wall isn't part of the game. Someone yesterday tried to escape by digging a hole into the wall, even though we are on the first floor is what they told us before we entered. I'm not an employee, but one of my most memorable experiences was in an escape room. My friends and I had been in the room for almost an hour and were just about to open what seemed to be the final safe. As we were opening it, we heard very loud footsteps coming downstairs from outside the room, heading our way. We all screamed and scrambled to open the safe. The safe finally opened, and in it sat a ring box, just as my then boyfriend and now husband came into the room. He got down on one knee and proposed, and it was honestly the most romantic thing that has happened to me. He had planned everything ahead of time with the escape room operators. No serious flag, oh boy. I was an assistant manager for one for 2 years. We had 2 rooms, an intro room which was dorm room themed and fairly easy, and another which was a 2-part room about breaking out of jail and then trying to prove your innocence. You could escape the room without proving your innocence. These are some stories. So in the dorm room, We one time had a dad come in with his wife and family and wanted to do a room. The kids are like .6 and 8 or something. Well, they did bad. Like, really bad. Any way they could get something wrong, they did. They refused to use hints and didn't want us giving any. So they failed. Badly. The dad was grumpy the whole time through the room, and at the end the kids asked if they could get ice cream. He responded with ice cream is for winners. And they left soon after. Also in the dorm room, we had a puzzle that utilized a map to create a number. And one of the places is Reykjavik, Iceland. The amount of people I heard unable to pronounce that, or even find it on a map. It was a general theme with people. The jail room was another thing. Like most jail rooms, the bars did something. Just a general theme, guys. You do a jail escape room. Check the bars first. We had a woman on a date one time. Very attractive woman with an older man. Well, in order to escape the cell you start in, you needed to use the broom to grab a key and unlock the door. The standard old jail escape ploy. Well, this woman decided to climb through a bar that raised about 2 feet. She did it while wearing handcuffs and nothing under her black dress. I happened to be the only person there and I was shocked. First and only time that ever happened. I don't think she realized we could see that well on the cameras and didn't seem to be bothered by it. Man, I could go on and on with these stories, especially about the jail, but I'm on mobile and it takes forever to type. Edit. Spelling is hard on mobile. My husband and I did an escape room a couple months ago for the first time. It was serial killer themed. So when we took the blindfolds off we were chained in a dirty, dimly lit bathroom. After getting free, we picked up the superpotent oil lantern that flickered to be creepy. We crawled around the room gathering tools and sharing this tiny flickering lantern. We solved about 4 puzzles in 40 minutes before discovering they had left us flashlights on a table to use. I used to own an escape room. By far the weirdest thing was a group that came. Maybe 18, 22 years old. They seemed nice, albeit a bit nerdy. We were chatting while they signed their waivers, and one of them asked if they could put on their capes. Of course we said sure, and they disappeared for a few minutes before returning wearing full-on superhero capes and plastic swords. The UN ironically played the entire escape room role-playing superhero nights. To each their own. I guess good for them for being themselves, but was very weird. Finally I can jump into one of these. 1. A very obviously wasted group came in to do a room. They signed the waivers and my boss told them they could play, so I started the orientation. Before they got in I had to ask one gentleman to put his nearly full whiskey glass in a locker, along with 2 flasks he had in his pocket. When the group got into the room he pulled out another flask, and his friend took his pants and shoes off. Now at this point, it's like 10:30 p.m. and I just wanna go home, so I don't really care. After the game they asked if there are cameras in the room. I said yes. It was explained to them earlier that there were, but they were too wasted to remember, and they left the building with such speed that it would put a group of elementary school students on the last day of school to shame. 2. So many wardrobe malfunctions. Please wear belts, people, I beg of you. 3. A couple that fought the entire way through the room and decided to break some props even after being told to stop. After the game, they left even when I tried stopping them. You gotta pay for crap you break, and they had somehow forgotten that I had their phone number, email, and full legal names, so it was pretty easy for police to get a hold of them, especially considering the sheriff's office was not even a kilometer down the street. I did an escape room with my middle school friends once. There were 7 of us. We were all stupid, so we took way too long to figure out the puzzles, but it probably didn't help that every member of the party was handcuffed right after entering the room and we couldn't find the key. In the last 20 minutes of the game we started getting desperate, and our game master told us that if we could do something to impress him, he'd give us another hint. We made a human motorcycle. It was just us piled on top of one another and rolling around on the ground. We got the extra hint. Probably someone that actually escaped. These things are hard. I built one for the guys who made Sherlock. Reading the other answers here you can imagine what the early stages of being open were like, with both idiot customers and staff who were still getting used to everything. Not an employee. But when I went to an escape room we had to do it in the dark. There was a box on a wall with circle cutouts and me just not knowing what I was looking for kept pulling my arm back and screaming. Because I felt something fuzzy. Honestly after getting out I laughed at myself. Because I probably looked so silly for being scared to feel around in a box. Not an employee, but my family did an escape room where on one side of a wall there was a key in a maze and the other side had a magnet. You were supposed to work together. One person calling out instructions for the maze and the other navigating the magnet. My dad spent half an hour just playing with the magnet, successfully finishing the maze himself. When we finished the room the employee came out and told us he never saw anyone do the maze on their own. Had two groups who had never met each other before the game come in. One group had a girl and the other group had a guy. They clearly hit it off and instead of playing the game, leave the room to go the bathroom one at a time. They thought I wouldn't notice. But whatever, they're adults. 15 minutes of their hour go by. They still haven't come back. I had a coworker go check in the single person bathroom while I focus on the rest of the group. And sure enough you can hear the head through the walls. Coworker knocks and says she needs to use the restroom. Girl says she's almost done. Girl comes out and goes back to room. Guy never comes back. She's upset she didn't get his number. But we all just assume her BJ game wasn't worth a second go round. I had someone throw money in my face because we didn't take cash. He said we legally had to and tried to convince me to keep it for myself. I don't know why he wanted to part with his money so badly. He had already paid for the game and just wanted a shirt. Didn't know this was a thing. I wouldn't do it in a million years. By minute 5 I'd be convinced I would never get out of there alive. Kind of anxious just writing about it. I worked in an escape room for around 4 years. There have been many weird and confusing things I have seen, not including the extreme amount of Karens who demand refunds when their babies don't escape before the time ends. I have a top 4. An older teenager, probably 16, 17, peeing on the floor. We tell all members that the front door is open and they are free to leave for the bathroom etc. Hid in the bathroom for an hour waiting for her mum to pick her up. Watching a man take off a concerning amount of clothes and run around the room with a prop tied as a bandana around his head. Heard and possibly witness a divorce of a couple arguing over a 2-player game. Bloody useless. Then why did you marry me if I'm so incompetent? Well, I didn't think you were 5 years ago. And lastly, my favorite / the reason I quit the job. A light bulb in our room stopped working. Instead of pressing the call button he decided he could fix it. IDK how, because all we needed was to replace it with another bulb. But anyway, this guy then pulled out every single wire in the game. $1,000 is of dollars of work and time to build, and then complain that it was our fault because we made his room faulty. But all in all, working there wasn't too bad. I thoroughly enjoyed the bachelorette parties that were joke and length. Also, the proposal in one of the rooms will always be my favorite day of work. Edit. I might also add that one of our franchised escape rooms had a guy take a massive crap on the floor for no reason whatsoever. Also, vomit is a common occurrence, but most make it to the bathroom thankfully. We did an escape room for my friend's hen do. Was a bank heist one. Being the smallest of the group, I was made to go into the crawl space with the safe while they told me which flags were the code to crack it. Apparently I'm not very good with flags anyway, and even worse when I'm on the spot, because I ended up screaming "What the frick is Poland?" just as we ran out of time. Employee was struggling to hold back the laughter when we came out, and I had several very mad off friends glaring at me.